A bitter November fog coiled along the narrow streets of Kingsbury Hollow, swallowing lamplight and footsteps alike. At precisely 6:14 in the evening, the silence shattered with a single startled cry, then a heavy, decisive thud. By the time the constable arrived, Lord Alistair Hemsworth lay motionless at the foot of his manor's grand staircase, his hand still clutched around a torn fragment of crimson silk. Something about the scene felt wrong, unmistakably staged. And when Hercule Poirot stepped through the threshold moments later, his eyes narrowed. Chapter 1. The Fall at Hemsworth Manor. The fog over Kingsbury Hollow was unlike any ordinary mist. It did not drift. It clung heavy and deliberate, pressing itself against brick walls and narrow alleys as though attempting to overhear the secrets whispered within the town. Tonight, it had settled low over Hemsworth Manor, making the sprawling Edwardian estate look like a ship adrift in a grey sea. Lanterns flickered along the gravel pathway, barely managing to burn through the gloom. At precisely 6:14, the manor's stillness shattered. A cry rang out, sharp, startled, almost questioning. Then came the sound that would haunt every servant who heard it. A deep, resonant thud, as unmistakable as it was final. By the time the household staff stumbled into the grand foyer, Lord Alistair Hemsworth lay sprawled at the foot of the sweeping staircase, his limbs twisted at angles no living man could retain. His hand, rigid even in death, held a torn scrap of crimson silk, bright as spilled wine against the black marble floor. When Hercule Poirot arrived 20 minutes later, ushered in by a trembling footman, the scene was frozen like the last moment of a tragic tableau. Poirot paused beneath the entry arch, his silhouette small yet unmistakably self-contained. His immaculate moustaches were perfectly waxed despite the fog. His grey suit bore not a fleck of dampness. He surveyed the room with an eagle's deliberation. "Merci," he said softly as the footman attempted to explain. "Later, we will have the details. For now, the silence, it speaks." His polished shoes made no sound on the marble as he stepped forward. The constable, red-cheeked and clearly out of his depth, turned to meet him. "Thank heavens you've come, Mr. Poirot. The station's been in a panic. The death of a lord and, well, look at this mess. He must have slipped. The staircase is slick from the fog." Poirot lifted a single eyebrow. "Inspector, Constable," the young man corrected timidly. "Forgive me, Constable. A man may slip, certainly, but a man who slips does not usually clutch a torn fabric with such determination." Poirot knelt near the body, careful not to disturb a single thread of evidence. The crimson silk lay visibly wrinkled within Hemsworth's stiffening fingers. He touched the edge with gloved fingers. Silk, torn, not cut. He leaned closer. And torn, recently. You may notice, mon ami, that the threads recoil like the whiskers of an offended cat. The constable blinked. "Meaning what exactly?" Poirot's voice dropped. "Meaning this death. It is not the accident it pretends to be." The servants were huddled near the kitchen doorway. Maids in aprons, footmen in livery, a butler whose stoicism was cracking around the eyes. Poirot allowed the constable to continue bumbling about the staircase while he observed the staff from afar. Fear had patterns. Inconsistency had shapes. And in the posture of each servant, Poirot saw both. He approached them slowly. "You are all very distressed," he said gently, "and with reason, but to uncover the truth, I must ask for clarity of mind." His gaze swept across them. Who discovered the body? A maid stepped forward reluctantly. She could not have been more than 20, her eyes wide as polished glass. I did, sir," I heard the fall. I was bringing up tea. I swear I didn't see anything else." Poirot nodded. "And before the cry, did you hear footsteps?" She hesitated. "Yes, but only one set. Lord Hemsworth's, I think." "You are certain it was his?" Another hesitation. I assume it was, sir." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Assumption is the mother of misjudgment, mademoiselle." The girl looked ready to faint. Before he could question further, another figure entered the foyer, Lady Eleanor Hemsworth, widow of the fallen lord. She was draped in a heavy black velvet gown, though her eyes were dry. Her entrance held neither haste nor hysteria. Her expression was a painting of poise. "Monsieur," she said, her voice cool and perfectly modulated, "I understand you wish to speak with me." Poirot bowed with courteous respect. "Madame, my deepest condolences." "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot," she replied with elegant restraint. Alistair's health had been failing. His nerves, his footing, were never what they used to be. This is tragic, but not unexpected. Poirot tilted his head. "Madame, with respect, even failing nerves do not tear silk from another's clothing." The cool mask faltered. She blinked once, slowly. "What are you implying?" "That I imply nothing. I merely observe. It is my habit." Poirot gestured toward the body. "Would you care to explain from where such fabric might originate?" Lady Eleanor glanced at the scrap, a quick darting look, and then fixed her gaze elsewhere. "I do not wear red silk," she said flatly. "Nor did my husband." Poirot nodded, storing her answer carefully. "Merci, madame. That alone is most enlightening." The constable fidgeted nearby. If it wasn't his and it wasn't hers, maybe it belongs to one of the servants. "A possibility," Poirot allowed, "but not one we assume. We must verify." He turned to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, with your permission, I will speak with everyone present, in the manner tonight." Lady Eleanor glanced up the staircase, to her husband's study at the landing, and then back down to Poirot. "Do as you must. I will assist where possible." But Poirot heard what she didn't offer: information, names, details, grief. Instead, she drifted away, her steps deliberate, disappearing deeper into the manor like a ghost seeking an exit. The constable leaned close. "Not very shaken, is she?" Poirot murmured. "Some people do not collapse when the tragedy arrives. They become statues. But statues, my friend, often hide cracks." As Poirot walked the perimeter of the foyer, he took special note of the staircase, the site of the supposed fall. The banister was polished, the steps wide and evenly spaced. No loose rug, no broken tile, no chipped wood. He crouched near the 5th step from the top. A faint scuff mark, barely visible except under a certain angle of lamplight. "Interesting," he muttered. Poirot touched the scuff gently. "Not from a shoe, but from something being dragged." "Dragged?" The constable squinted. "The body?" "No," Poirot said. "Hemsworth fell. That is clear. But before he fell, someone stood here. Someone whose shoe left no trace because their weight was shifted as they leaned, perhaps pulling something or someone." He straightened. "And consider, mon ami," Lord Hemsworth cried out. "A man who trips does not cry out in surprise, he cries in fright, in pain. But Hemsworth's cry was brief, sudden, a cry of startlement, not fear." "You mean someone surprised him?" Poirot clicked his tongue. "I mean someone confronted him." The drawing-room was warm compared to the foyer, its mahogany walls reflecting the crackling firelight. Poirot requested it for interviews, arranging chairs at specific angles. "Position matters," he told the constable. "When one sits too close, they hide. When too far, they disengage. Balance reveals truth." First came Mr. Arthur Wade, the butler, tall, gaunt, with a spine so rigid he looked carved from cedar. Lord Hemsworth was a respectable man, he began, respected by all. Poirot's moustaches twitched. A respected man is not always a liked man, Monsieur Wade. The butler hesitated. No, sir, he was not universally liked. Poirot leaned forward slightly. And you, monsieur, were you fond of your master? A pause. Too long. I served him faithfully. Ah, but serving faithfully is not the same as serving gladly. Wade stiffened, but Poirot continued gently. Did you witness anything unusual today? Perhaps an argument? A raised voice? No, sir. A visitor? Unexpected? No, sir. Poirot tapped his fingers. You did not see a garment of red silk anywhere in the house? On a coat, a scarf, a dress? The butler's eyes flickered. I cannot recall. Poirot noticed the flicker. He always noticed the flicker. Merci, Monsieur Wade. You have been most illuminating. Wade bowed and shuffled out. Next came Miss Clara Dunn, the maid who'd found the body. She sat nervously, twisting her apron. Miss Dunn, Poirot said softly, you must not fear. We seek only the truth. I'm trying, sir, truly. You said you heard only one set of footsteps before the fall. Do you still believe so? I think so. But I was in the hallway, sir. I wasn't right near the stairs. You heard the cry? Yes. It was so sudden, like someone surprised him. Poirot nodded. And the silk? I've never seen it before in my life, sir. He believed her. Fear had its own smell. She reeked of it. You may go. Rest, mademoiselle. The final interview of the evening arrived with an air of contained agitation. Sebastian Clarke, Lord Hemsworth's nephew. A young man of perhaps 27, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that changed shade depending on the light, sometimes blue, sometimes steel. His clothing was impeccable, his expression brittle. I suppose you're here to ask whether I killed him, Sebastian said before even sitting down. Poirot gestured gracefully. I ask no such thing, you assume. I have no reason to kill my uncle. We didn't get on, but I didn't wish him dead. Poirot steepled his fingers. Your uncle was wealthy? He was wealthy and controlling, Sebastian replied. He managed the estate finances. He kept me dependent. Do not leap to conclusions. Poirot smiled faintly. I never leap. I walk very carefully. Sebastian exhaled sharply. He was going to change his will, make it stricter. He threatened it last week. Said if I did not prove myself useful, he would leave everything to charity. But that argument has nothing to do with tonight. Poirot's eyebrows rose. An argument about inheritance, a raised voice, a threat. Mon ami, these things are always relevant. Sebastian leaned back. You think I tore that silk? That I, pushed him down the stairs? Did you? No. Poirot studied him. The anger was real, but anger did not preclude guilt. What of the red silk? Poirot asked calmly. Sebastian froze for half a heartbeat. Then, I've never seen it. Poirot nodded slowly. Très bien, you may go. When the interviews concluded, the manor had grown quieter, the fog beyond the windows thicker. The hour later than the servants wished to imagine. The constable rubbed his temples. What do you make of all of this, Mr. Poirot? Poirot glanced at the staircase. The scuff mark, the still form of Lord Hemsworth being prepared for transport. I make of it a puzzle with missing pieces, Poirot said. But the pieces, they exist. They merely lie scattered. Any suspects? Poirot turned slightly. All of them. The constable swallowed. Even Lady Eleanor? Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. Especially Lady Eleanor. He stepped back, staring at the crimson silk. This fabric! It does not belong to a widow's gown, nor a servant's apron, nor a gentleman's coat. Poirot held it up to the lamplight. This silk, it belongs to a woman of elegance, a woman who was here tonight. But Lady Eleanor said what she wished me to believe. Poirot's eyes glittered. And now, mon ami, we must find the woman who wore this silk. He paused deliberately. And why she fled before the body fell? A cold silence swept the room. Poirot added slowly, "There is inconsistency in this tale, and where there is inconsistency, there is murder." Chapter 2. The Silk Fragment and the Silent Witness. The night drew deeper around Hemsworth Manor, turning the windows into dark panes of polished obsidian. The fog pressed tighter against the glass, as though trying to smother the great house under a blanket of silence. Yet, inside the manor, silence was the one thing impossible to maintain. Servants whispered in corners. Lady Eleanor disappeared into her private rooms. Sebastian paced restlessly. The constable lingered uncomfortably, uncertain whether to treat the death as accident or murder. Hercule Poirot, however, had no such uncertainty. He stood in the centre of the foyer, turning the scrap of crimson silk delicately between his fingers. Under lamplight, the fabric shimmered faintly, like the wing of a rare moth. "A woman's fabric," he murmured. "A fine woman's, and one whose garment is crafted by a tailor of no little skill." Poirot lifted the silk closer to his eyes. "It is torn, but the edges, they tell a story." The constable shuffled closer, voice hushed. "What story would fabric tell, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot smiled gently. "A very talkative story, if one knows how to listen." He gestured toward the staircase. "This scrap, its threads are bent outward on one side, inward on the other. That means it was torn with force, pulled from the garment. And the grip, Lord Hemsworth's final act, tells me he tore it while falling, perhaps wrenching it from an assailant." The constable blinked. "So, someone was right next to him." Poirot nodded, so close they could whisper into his ear. A chill dripped down the constable's neck. "And that someone," Poirot continued, "was a woman, or wearing the garment of one." He folded the fabric carefully into his pocket. "And now we must go where the truth waits, sometimes patiently, sometimes not." "Where's that?" the constable asked. Poirot pointed his cane toward the upper landing. "The study of Lord Hemsworth." The climb up the sweeping staircase felt heavier than the manor's air. Each step carried the weight of the crime, each echo a reminder that Lord Hemsworth had descended these very stairs in terror or shock, or both. Poirot paused midway. "The scuff we noted earlier," he said softly. "It suggests a figure stood here. He faced the landing, perhaps blocking the path, or waiting, like a spider waits in its web." He tapped the step with his cane tip. And Lord Hemsworth approached. He must have known the assailant, or believed he did. The constable frowned. "What makes you say that?" "A man does not rush to meet a stranger in the dark, but one might approach a familiar face and say, 'Perhaps, what are you doing here?'" Poirot resumed climbing, and perhaps the answer was a push. Lord Hemsworth's study occupied nearly half the upper floor. It was an expansive chamber, lined with tall bookshelves, polished wood, and thick carpets. A fire had been burning earlier. Its remaining embers glowed faintly, like the dying heartbeat of a secret. Poirot entered with a slow sweep of his gaze. The constable followed, lighting an additional lamp. Poirot approached the desk first. Papers were neatly arranged. A fountain pen sat at a precise angle. A silver-framed photograph of Lady Eleanor rested atop a stack of correspondences. Everything immaculate. "Strange," Poirot murmured. "What's strange?" the constable asked. Poirot pointed to the desk chair. Lord Hemsworth was a man of habit. He always pulled his chair back before standing, yet tonight the chair is pushed in, as though he left abruptly, or as though someone else pushed it. He touched the chair lightly, and feel warm. He was sitting here earlier, recently. Poirot turned toward the fireplace. There, on the mantel, lay an unlit candle, half melted, its wax pooled irregularly, as though snuffed out hurriedly before it could finish burning. Poirot lifted the candle, studying the wick. Burnt but not extinguished by breath, he said. It was crushed between fingers. Someone acted in haste. The constable scratched his head. Why put out a candle if a fire was going? Doesn't make sense. It does, mon ami, Poirot said, if one wished darkness for privacy. He moved toward the window. The heavy curtains were drawn tightly shut. Poirot touched the fabric. Warm, he whispered. They were closed moments before the fall. Someone did not wish to be seen, not from inside. His gaze drifted outward, but from the gardens. A subtle shift on the surface of the glass caught his eye. He leaned closer. A fingerprint, he breathed. The constable rushed forward. Lord Hemsworth's. Poirot shook his head. This is small, narrow, feminine. He stepped back. The woman with the red silk. She was here. A soft creak sounded from the hallway. Poirot turned sharply. In the doorway stood Lady Eleanor. Her hands were clasped together, her posture elegant, her expression unreadable. I see you find my husband's study fascinating, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot offered a light bow. A room holds the breath of its owner, madame. It tells more truths than most. People dare. She stepped inside gracefully. Her gown swept across the carpet like spilled ink. My husband worked late this evening, she said. He was unsettled. Something had troubled him the past week. He spoke little of it. And what, madame? Poirot asked gently. Troubled Lord Hemsworth so greatly? Lady Eleanor looked to the fire's embers. A letter, she said at last. He received one 5 days ago. I do not know from whom. But after reading it, he locked himself in this study for almost 2 hours. Poirot leaned in. Did he mention it afterward? Yes, only once. He said the letter concerned a matter from long ago, something he believed settled. And where is the letter now? Lady Eleanor's lips thinned. I do not know. Poirot's gaze flicked toward the immaculate desk. Madame, forgive me, but I do not believe you. For the first time that night, her composure fractured. How dare you? She whispered. Truth is rarely polite, madame, Poirot said, but it is persistent. She stiffened. My husband's papers are personal. I did not pry. Poirot glanced toward the silver-framed photograph on the desk. But someone did, he said quietly. The rug near the desk has faint impressions of a shoe, smaller than Lord Hemsworth's, possibly a woman's. Lady Eleanor's breath hitched, barely audible. Poirot continued. You claim ignorance of the letter, yet the blotter shows signs of recent handling by someone with smaller hands. The widow's gaze swiveled sharply toward the desk blotter. You think Poirot raised a palm. I think, madame, that you know more than you admit. The truth, it presses always against the lips, until finally one must speak. Lady Eleanor's eyes glinted. You forget yourself, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot bowed slightly. And you, madame, forget that your husband clutched the silk of another woman as he died. A silence thickened the room. Lady Eleanor stepped back toward the doorway. Her voice turned cold, commanding. You will not accuse me without proof. Poirot answered softly. I accuse no one. I merely observe, and the observations, they dance like shadows in this house. Lady Eleanor turned, sweeping out, but not before whispering, You will not find what you are looking for. Poirot replied under his breath, After she left. I already have." The constable exhaled shakily. "I don't like her, Mr. Poirot." Poirot shook his head. "It is not a matter of liking. It is a matter of truth." He searched the desk drawers meticulously. Most held mundane documents, estate ledgers, mundane correspondences, invitations. But the bottom drawer stuck slightly. Poirot smiled. "Ah, and here we have resistance. Where there is resistance, there is something one does not wish found." He tugged it open. Inside lay a sealed envelope, a handkerchief embroidered with initials, a small silver key tied with ribbon, and a pressed violet. The constable leaned over his shoulder. "What in heaven's name?" Poirot lifted the envelope first. The handwriting was elegant, looped, unmistakably feminine. "It is not opened," Poirot murmured. Lord Hemsworth hesitated. He placed it aside carefully. Then he lifted the handkerchief. The initials, stitched in gold thread, formed a delicate monogram. "E.D." The constable blinked. "Eleanor, something." Poirot's head moved gently side to side. "No. Lady Eleanor's maiden name is Fairborn. Her initials are E.F. And this isn't hers?" "No, mon ami. This belongs to a woman whose last name begins with D." Poirot set it aside. The key was next. Small, delicate, more ornamental than practical. Its bow was shaped like a lily. Poirot examined it under the light. "Not the key to a door," he murmured. "To a box, a small one, perhaps, a jewellery box or a keepsake chest." "And the violet?" the constable asked. Poirot smiled faintly. "A pressed violet is rarely innocent. It is the symbol of memories, soft, fragile, yet never forgetful." He placed all 4 items in a neat, precise line. "These were hidden," he said, "tucked away. A drawer not often opened, yet not locked. As though Lord Hemsworth kept them close, but not close enough for his wife to notice." The constable hesitated. "You think he had a lover?" Poirot sighed. "I think, mon ami, that Lord Hemsworth had a past, and pasts often return like ghosts, uninvited and unquiet." He tapped the monogrammed handkerchief. "And I think E.D. has returned." Poirot spent the next hour combing through the study with his lantern, examining the edges of bookshelves, the fireplace grate, the carpet's weave. Each detail told a fraction of a story, but none yet revealed the whole. At last he reached the window again. The fingerprint remained. He studied it anew, and beneath it, barely visible, a smear of something faintly red. Poirot touched it lightly. "Lipstick," he whispered, faint, smudged, a hurried touch to glass. Perhaps the woman leaned to peer outside. The constable looked stunned. So a woman was here, earlier today. Poirot nodded slowly. And not just here. She was with Lord Hemsworth in this very room, possibly moments before the fall. He stepped back, eyes narrowing. But who is she? And why did she leave behind silk, fingerprints, lipstick, a handkerchief, a key, yet no face, no footsteps, no voice? Poirot turned to the embers again. "You see, mon ami, the woman did not flee the house after speaking with Lord Hemsworth. The fog was too thick, the grounds too exposed, no carriage wheels, no gate sound." The constable's eyes went wide. "You mean, yes," Poirot said quietly. "She is still here, somewhere in this house." A cold wind rattled the window. Poirot looked toward the corridor, his voice barely above a whisper. "And she is hiding, watching, listening." He picked up the silk once more. "The question is not whether she is here, but why she has not revealed herself." He turned toward the door. "And I fear, mon ami, we may soon discover the reason." As they stepped out into the dimly lit corridor, Poirot paused suddenly. Somewhere deeper in the house, down a hallway cloaked in darkness, a floorboard creaked. not by accident, but under the weight of a deliberate, cautious step. Poirot's eyes sharpened. The silent witness, he murmured, is not so silent after all. Chapter 3. Conversations in the fog. The manor breathed uneasily as night deepened, its corridors narrow throats of shadow and polished wood. Poirot walked with measured steps, cane tapping softly, the constable hurrying behind. Somewhere within these walls, a stranger, a woman of red silk, moved like a whispered rumour. The silence pressed so closely it felt almost tactile. "Mr. Poirot," the constable whispered, "shouldn't we alert the rest of the household, if there's someone hiding?" Poirot raised a finger. "When a mouse hides, mon ami, you do not announce to the cat where it waits. No, we observe, quietly, always quietly." They reached a small landing, where a narrow corridor split into two wings. A faint draught curled from the left passage, carrying with it the scent of damp fabric and old air. Poirot turned. From the east wing, the servants' rooms. From the west, the guest chambers. "And you think she's in one of them?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I think she is clever. But clever people make mistakes. Their caution, how you say, becomes too careful." He pointed to the floor. "Look." The constable bent low. A faint smudge of red, almost invisible, brushed the wooden floorboard's edge. "Lipstick," Poirot murmured, "the same shade as on the study window." The constable swallowed. "So she came this way." Poirot nodded. "And she stopped here." He knocked lightly on the nearest door. There was no answer. Poirot turned the handle. It opened with a soft click, revealing an unused guest room. The bed still made, the drapes drawn, the air stale with disuse. No footprints in the dust, no disturbance of the covers. "Non," Poirot whispered. "She did not enter." At the second door, Poirot paused longer. He touched the brass handle and felt a warmth, faint but present. He smiled. "And here is our mouse." Before he could open it, quick footsteps sounded behind them. Sebastian Hemsworth rounded the corner, breath sharp, expression tight. "What are you doing in this wing?" he snapped. "These rooms are private." Poirot cocked his head. "Private? For whom? This manor is not a maze. I wander for pleasure. I follow facts, and they lead here." Sebastian's jaw clenched. "Whatever you think you're looking for, you're mistaken." Poirot tapped his cane once on the floor. "Perhaps, but perhaps I am very much correct." Sebastian stepped between Poirot and the door. "Nobody has used this room in months. My aunt stores linens here." Poirot's eyes dropped to the carpet. "Then perhaps the linens walk, monsieur. You see the imprint of a shoe? A woman's heel, recently made." Sebastian stiffened. Poirot's voice softened. "Do not lie to me. Lies are like weeds. They reveal the gardener." Before Sebastian could answer, the corridor lights flickered. A hush rolled over the hall, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Poirot turned the handle. The door opened. Inside was darkness, thick, consuming darkness. Poirot stepped in first, lantern raised, illuminating the edges of the room. The air smelled faintly of perfume. Something sweet. Jasmine, perhaps. The constable scanned the chamber. Sheets had been disturbed. A wardrobe door hung ajar. A glass of water sat half-finished beside the mantel. Sebastian's face paled. Poirot stepped toward the wardrobe and slid it open. Inside hung coats, hats, and a single long red garment bag. Poirot touched it. "Ah, and here lies the truth." Sebastian grabbed his arm. "Don't!" Poirot raised a brow. "You object." Sebastian's chest rose and fell rapidly. "That bag is not mine." Poirot's gaze sharpened. That much is clear." He unzipped the garment bag slowly. Inside hung a dress of deep crimson silk, exquisite, expensive, unmistakably torn at the hem. The constable gasped. "That's the same fabric." Poirot nodded. "Yes, the missing piece belongs to this gown. A gown that was worn recently, and in haste, from the look of the hurried stitching on the seam." Sebastian backed away, hands trembling. "I don't know anything about this." Poirot stepped toward him. "But someone brought this dress into your wing. Into a room you insisted was unused. Someone you know, perhaps? Someone you protect." Sebastian's eyes darted, calculating, desperate. "No," he said at last. Too quickly. Poirot studied him. "There is fear in your eyes, Monsieur Sebastien. Not of guilt, but of consequence. You hide something, but not everything." Sebastian swallowed. "I didn't kill him." Poirot nodded calmly. "I never said you did." As they exited the chamber, Poirot paused at the threshold, glancing once more at the crimson dress swaying faintly from the draught. "She was here," he whispered. "She rested. She removed the dress. She hid it. Then she slipped away again." The constable stepped closer. "Where could she go from here?" Poirot's voice was low. "There are servant passages behind the walls. Hidden doors. These old houses have many secrets, and the murderer has found them." Sebastian flinched. Poirot turned to him. "You know these passages?" A long silence. Then Sebastian exhaled. "Yes." Poirot stepped closer. "Then you know who used them?" Sebastian looked away. "I can't say. Not yet." Poirot nodded, as though expecting this. "Very well. But know this, mon ami. Truth is a bird that escapes every cage, and you cannot hold it long." He turned toward the shadowed corridor. "Come, the house has not finished speaking." As they walked, the fog pressed against the windows harder. Somewhere distant, a door closed softly, deliberately. Poirot froze, his voice a whisper. She moves again. Chapter 4. Suspicions among the aristocracy. The fog had lifted only slightly by the time Hercule Poirot returned to Hemsworth Manor the next morning, but the atmosphere inside remained thick with tension. An invisible mist of secrets clinging to the walls, suspended in the pauses between each carefully measured word spoken by those who resided within. The grand breakfast room, with its tall mullioned windows and gleaming silverware, appeared almost serene at first glance. Yet beneath the civility lay a tremor, a tightness in posture and voice that betrayed the anxieties simmering beneath the aristocratic veneer. Lady Evelyn Hemsworth sat at the head of the long walnut table, poised with a grace that looked rehearsed, too rehearsed. Her dark hair was coiled impeccably, her silk morning gown almost offensively elegant for a woman newly widowed. She poured tea with slow, deliberate movements, as if the act itself required supreme concentration. Across from her sat Mr. Felix Granger, Lord Hemsworth's personal secretary, his round spectacles still fogged at the edges from the chill outside. He was tapping a fountain pen against his notebook in a nervous rat-tat rhythm that grated against the fragile quiet of the room. Two more were present. Miss Beatrice Langford, the late Lord's childhood friend and once rumoured paramour, who stared fixedly at the untouched marmalade toast before her, and Mr. Julian Marsh, a theatre impresario known in London, circles for flamboyant productions and even more flamboyant debts. Marsh lounged back in his chair with a casualness that felt intentional, as though to distract from something he hoped would not be questioned. Poirot entered without ceremony, his polished shoes clicking lightly against the parquet floor. All heads turned toward him, and though every face wore a mask, composed, polite, there was unmistakable disruption behind the eyes. He offered a courteous bow. "Mesdames, messieurs, I trust the morning finds you, well, under the circumstances." Lady Evelyn set down the silver teapot. "Monsieur Poirot, please join us. I felt it best that everyone gather together this morning. We have all been unsettled." Poirot's eyes flicked across each face. Unsettled, yes, and perhaps also eager that the matter of Lord Hemsworth's death be clarified swiftly. Mr. Marsh crossed his legs with a theatrical sigh. Naturally. No one here wants suspicion hanging in the air like yesterday's fog. Poirot tilted his head. "Suspicion, Mr. Marsh, is most curious. It clings not without reason." A faint, brittle silence followed. Poirot took a seat at the midpoint of the table, though he did not eat. His gaze swept the spread of pastries and fruit as though searching for something symbolic in their placement. Finally, he spoke again. "Lord Hemsworth's fall. It is not consistent with a simple misstep." Lady Evelyn stiffened. "Inspector Doyle already mentioned you had concerns. May I ask directly, do you believe Alistair was murdered?" Poirot folded his hands. "I believe, madame, that something about the circumstances of his death demands careful thought. And so, I must ask questions of all present." The secretary, Felix Granger, cleared his throat anxiously. "Of course, monsieur, whatever is needed." Poirot turned to him first. "Monsieur Granger, you were in the study last night when the constable arrived?" "Yes," Granger replied quickly. "I was preparing Lord Hemsworth's correspondence. I heard the fall, or rather, a sound I assumed to be a fall." "You assumed," Poirot repeated, "and yet you did not rush to see. Curious." Granger flushed. I was searching for the key to his safe. Lord Hemsworth had asked me earlier to retrieve a document for him, but I could not find the key." Poirot observed him closely. "And this document, it was of importance?" "Possibly. He did not specify." "Yet you did not ask." Granger's discomfort grew. Lord Hemsworth could be private. Poirot did not press further, though he made a mental note. His gaze shifted to Miss Langford. "Mademoiselle, last night you said that you were in your room at the time of the incident. Did you hear anything unusual?" Beatrice's hands tightened around her teacup. Her voice, when it emerged, was low but steady. "Only the thud. And a moment before that, footsteps, quick ones." "Ascending or descending?" Poirot asked. She hesitated, eyes narrowing as she replayed the sound. "Descending, I'm certain." Poirot nodded slowly. "Merci, Mademoiselle Langford." Next he faced Julian Marsh, whose expression had grown increasingly irritable. "And you, Monsieur Marsh, what were you doing at the exact moment the tragedy occurred?" Marsh raised a brow. "Making a telephone call in the library." Poirot's moustaches lifted a fraction. "To whom?" "A business associate." "And this associate will confirm the call?" The impresario faltered. It was slight, but Poirot seized upon it instantly. I am sure he will, yes." Poirot leaned forward. "You are certain, or you hope? There is a difference." Marsh scowled. "Very well, yes, I hope. The line was dreadful. The call may not have connected properly." "Ah," Poirot murmured, "inconvenient." This time Lady Evelyn intervened, voice sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, must you interrogate my guests as though they were criminals? They are already distressed." Poirot rose from his seat with gentle dignity. "Madame, when a man dies under troubling circumstances, no question is too small. If innocent, your guests should have no cause for concern." Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed, though she held her composure. "Then it is settled. You suspect someone here." Poirot paused. In the silence, The ticking of the mantel clock sounded louder than usual, each second a small hammer tapping at the fragile civility in the room. "I suspect, madame," he said softly, "that Lord Hemsworth knew something dangerous, and someone in this household feared that knowledge." A collective tension surged through the room. Poirot continued, "Last night, the torn fragment of red silk found in Lord Hemsworth's hand. Someone here knows its origin." Beatrice's breath caught. Marsh's fingers tightened around the armrest. Granger looked ready to faint, and Lady Evelyn's eyes widened ever so slightly before narrowing again. The movement so controlled that anyone but Poirot would have missed it. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "I shall conduct individual conversations with each of you today, but before we part, there is one more matter." He walked to the window overlooking the courtyard. The footsteps that Mademoiselle Langford heard descending the staircase, they do not match the estimated time of Lord Hemsworth's fall. "What are you implying?" Marsh demanded. Poirot turned, his expression solemn. "I am implying, Monsieur Marsh, that someone descended the stairs after Lord Hemsworth had already fallen." A ripple of shock spread across the room. "Then, that person," Granger whispered, "would have seen the body?" "Oui," Poirot replied, "seen the body, and possibly adjusted the scene." Lady Evelyn gasped softly. Poirot concluded, "Someone in this household is lying, and by the end of today I shall know who." Chapter 5. A Letter Never Sent. The day had advanced into a muted grey noon by the time Hercule Poirot made his way to Lord Hemsworth's private study. The room had been sealed since the night of the fall, the constable insisting on preserving the scene until the detective finished his preliminary inquiries. Poirot paused before the heavy oak door, fingertips brushing the polished brass handle. There was a solemnity to this chamber, a place where Lord Hemsworth had conducted business, entertained secrets, and now, perhaps, left behind the one clue no murderer expected him to record. Entering, Poirot took in the study with a measured gaze. Dust motes floated in the slanted light spilling from the wide windows. Bookshelves, packed densely with volumes of law, history, and obscure treatises, framed the space like silent witnesses. A faint scent of tobacco lingered in the air. On the Persian rug near the hearth, a single overturned chair spoke of a hurried interruption, perhaps moments before the death, or staged after. Poirot approached the grand mahogany desk. Its surface was meticulously arranged. A brass lamp, a crystal inkwell, neatly stacked correspondence, and in the centre, an empty blotting sheet with a faint rectangular shadow, as though something had sat upon it for a long time and been removed recently. He leaned closer. The absence intrigued him more than any presence. "Mon ami," he murmured under his breath, "you intended to write something, did you not?" A small pile of letters demanded his attention next. Most were routine. Invitations, estate matters, a bill from a tailor. Poirot methodically sorted them until one envelope, cream-coloured, slightly thicker than the others, caught his eye. It bore no address. Only a single initial on the front, penned hastily. Poirot slid it open with surgical care. Inside lay a folded page filled with uneven handwriting, written, it seemed, in haste, perhaps in agitation. He read the first line, and his brow lifted. "Evelyn, I cannot keep silent any longer." So the letter was for Lady Evelyn. Poirot continued reading. The next line sent a ripple of cold clarity through him. "If anything should happen to me, if I am found dead, you must know it was no accident." He paused, letting the words settle like dust upon still air. This letter, unfinished as it was, bore the unmistakable mark of fear. He resumed, "There is someone in this house who knows about the arrangement. Someone who has already warned me once. I have come to suspect." The sentence broke off. The ink stroke ending it was jagged, interrupted sharply, as though the writer had been startled or forced to stop. Poirot examined the end of the line closely. A drop of darker ink had pooled there. Evidence of a sudden movement or a halted hand. Poirot placed the letter flat on the desk and tapped his finger lightly beside it. "So, mon pauvre Lord Hemsworth, you tried to name your enemy, and then you could not." But what was this arrangement he referenced? A financial one? A secret agreement? A blackmail situation? Too early to know, but certainly significant enough to cost a man his life. Poirot slipped the letter back into its envelope and tucked it carefully into his pocket. Its implications were severe, and he intended to reveal it at precisely the right moment, when the reactions of those present could not be masked. He turned next to the safe embedded in the wall behind a framed portrait. It had already been opened by the constable, but Poirot examined it anew. Inside, the contents appeared undisturbed. Legal documents, property deeds, an ornate cigar case, and a ledger. But there was a space, subtle but clear, where a book or binder had once rested. A gap defined by faint dust outlines. Something had been removed. "And hurriedly," Poirot whispered, noting the smudged prints inside the compartment. They were not Lord Hemsworth's. The butler had confirmed he was the only one who regularly handled the dice, safe's contents besides the late lord himself. Poirot removed the ledger next. Its entries, written in an accountant's tidy hand, catalogued transactions both mundane and extravagant. Then, midway through the book, Poirot found something curious. Several pages had been torn out. Not carefully cut, but ripped, leaving uneven stubs along the spine. He laid the ledger open on the desk. Pages removed from the ledger, a missing document, and a letter never sent. Poirot murmured, "It paints a picture, if one has the eyes to see." He turned his attention then to the waste bin beside the desk. Inside, beneath crumpled drafts, lay a burnt scrap of paper. Poirot retrieved it delicately with tweezers. Only a few legible words remained: transaction, marsh, and due. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Julian Marsh, the flamboyant theatre impresario who had behaved so nervously at breakfast? The connection was too neat to dismiss. And yet, for murderers often planted crumbs in hopes that detectives would follow the wrong trail. He steepled his fingers. "No, no. It is too early to declare guilt. Too early." Poirot stepped back, observing the entire study again with renewed insight. The overturned chair suggested a struggle, or someone staging one. The missing document hinted at a motive. The destroyed note hinted at desperation. And the unfinished letter hinted at the murderer's identity, if only the final words had been written. Poirot stood silently for a long moment, his gaze sweeping the room, reconstructing the final moments of Lord Hemsworth's life. He imagined the man seated at his desk, writing in haste. A noise behind him, perhaps footsteps, a confrontation, the torn letter abandoned, a threat uttered in a low voice, and then... Poirot inhaled sharply. "But of course," he whispered, "the murderer did not fear the fall. They feared what Lord Hemsworth was about to reveal." He left the study with purpose. The household would soon face another round of questioning, but this time Poirot would ask with the weight of knowledge. He now possessed leverage, one that would force masks to crack. As he closed the door gently behind him, Poirot allowed himself the faintest smile. "The truth," he murmured, "is beginning to step out of the shadows." Chapter 6. The Pianist with Trembling Hands. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through the tall windows of the Hemsworth music room. illuminating dust motes that shimmered like faint ghosts above the polished wooden floor. Hercule Poirot entered with a quiet step, his attention immediately captured by the grand piano dominating the room. Its deep mahogany finish gleamed, though one corner bore a faint scratch, as if someone had recently brushed past it in haste. The piano bench was slightly askew, as though vacated quickly. Poirot's eyes narrowed in quiet reflection. Miss Beatrice Langford stood near the instrument, hands clasped tightly before her, knuckles pale. She wore a soft lavender gown, elegant yet understated, and seemed almost part of the room's stillness, except for the subtle tremor in her right hand. Poirot noticed it instantly. "Ah, Mademoiselle Langford," he greeted gently. "How kind of you to come at my request." Beatrice managed a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. "I suspected you would want to speak with me further, Monsieur Poirot. After this morning, everything feels so strained." Poirot studied her posture, the slight stoop of someone carrying unseen burdens. "Please," he said, gesturing toward the piano bench. "Sit, if you would prefer." But she shook her head quickly, as though the idea of sitting at the piano unnerved her. Poirot made note of that as well. Silence lingered a moment before he asked, "Tell me, mademoiselle, did you often play for Lord Hemsworth?" Her throat tightened as she answered, "Yes, almost every evening when I visited. Alistair said it helped him think. He would sit there," she motioned to a deep armchair near the fire, "and listen while he worked. I suppose it became a kind of ritual." Poirot tilted his head. "And last night, did you play?" Beatrice hesitated. "No, I was not feeling well. I retired early. You have been unwell recently?" "A little. Nerves, perhaps." She wrapped her arms around herself. "This house, it has felt different these past weeks. Alistair was not himself. He was restless, preoccupied. He would startle easily, and he had taken to locking the study door, even when he was only reading." Poirot said nothing, allowing the flow of her words to continue unimpeded. "He was afraid," she whispered. "I could see it. And when I asked him why, he told me only that it would soon be resolved. He never explained what." Poirot moved closer to the piano, running a fingertip along the edge. "Mademoiselle, may I ask, were you aware of any arrangement Lord Hemsworth was involved in? Something clandestine, perhaps? Something he feared?" She blinked. "Arrangement? No, unless—" She stopped abruptly, biting her lip. Poirot waited, silent, patient. She finally sighed, defeated. "There was one thing, about 2 months ago. Alistair asked me to deliver a sealed envelope to a solicitor of his in London. He stressed that it was confidential. I didn't ask, of course, but when I arrived at the solicitor's office, they said they had not expected anything from him. They accepted it, but they seemed surprised. When I told Alistair this later, he dismissed it quickly and changed the subject." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you did not think to ask further? I trusted him," Beatrice said softly, "perhaps too much." A silence fell, heavy and thoughtful. Poirot then steered the conversation. "Mademoiselle, you heard footsteps descending the staircase shortly before the fall. You are confident?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I remember it distinctly. Did you recognize anything about them? The speed? The weight?" She frowned, thinking. "They were quick, lighter, I think, not heavy like Alistair's. And, she hesitated again. There was something else. A faint tapping noise, almost like someone's ring striking the banister as they descended." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A ring? Yes, I'm almost certain. It was rhythmic, like accidental tapping." Poirot leaned back slightly, considering the implications. "Mademoiselle, may I see your hands?" She blinked in surprise, My hands? Oui, if you please. Beatrice extended them. Her fingers were elegant, long, those of a pianist, but Poirot's gaze fixed not on her nails or joints, but on the simple, thin silver band she wore on her left hand. It would not produce the tapping she described. Not you, he said softly, but someone else. Someone who wears a heavier ring, and who descended the stairs after Lord Hemsworth had fallen. Beatrice swallowed. Poirot, do you think whoever came down saw Alistair alive? Poirot closed his eyes briefly. No, mademoiselle, I think they saw him dead. She covered her mouth with trembling fingers. God! Poirot stepped around her, examining the area around the piano. On the polished surface near the keys, he found a small, nearly invisible smear. He dabbed it with a handkerchief, then examined it in the light. Tears, or sweat. He turned to Beatrice. Someone was here last night, sitting at the piano, someone who was distressed. Beatrice's voice cracked. That wasn't me. I know, Poirot said gently, but someone in this house plays, and someone came here after the fall, perhaps to compose themselves. Beatrice stared at him, fear widening her eyes. Poirot, you think the murderer sat here, in this room? He did not answer directly. Tell me, mademoiselle, does Lady Evelyn play the piano? No, she despises it. Beatrice exhaled shakily. Felix Granger! He has no musical talent, and Marsh, well, he claims to enjoy music, but I doubt he remembers the difference between a scale and an arpeggio. Poirot's thoughts aligned with a click. A new angle, a fresh suspect, or an old one newly sharpened. He stepped once more toward her. Mademoiselle Langford, one last question. This trembling in your hands, has it started recently? She hesitated. Since last night, she admitted, I was frightened. Poirot nodded slowly. I believe you. He took her gently by the elbow and guided her toward the door. Be strong, mademoiselle, he murmured. The truth approaches, and truth, she is relentless. As she left, Poirot stood alone in the music room, listening to the faint hum of silence. His gaze drifted once more to the piano bench, the slight displacement, the trembling smear. He whispered, The killer returned here, but why? To remember, to regret, or perhaps to rehearse their alibi? Poirot touched the piano keys once, producing a soft, haunting note. The mystery deepened, and now he knew exactly whom to question next. Chapter 7. The midnight confession night draped itself heavily over Hemsworth Manor, settling across its gables and chimneys like a velvet shroud. Long after the household had retired, a lone lamp still burned in the small drawing-room adjoining the library. Hercule Poirot sat within its circle of amber light, his silhouette sharp against the dimness. He waited with the patience of a man accustomed to the slow unravelling of lies. A cup of cooling chamomile rested before him, untouched. The clock on the mantel ticked rhythmically, each second a soft echo marking the approach of truth. He heard the footsteps long before the timid knock came. Soft, hesitant, each step betraying an inner battle. Poirot straightened in his chair. Entrez, he said calmly. The door opened with the faintest creak, and Felix Granger stepped inside, pale as parchment. The secretary's hands trembled, though he clasped them tightly behind his back, as though attempting to hide the betrayal. His spectacles sat crookedly, and his tie was slightly askew, details Poirot absorbed with immediate precision. Monsieur Poirot, Granger whispered, his voice fraying at the edges, you wish to speak with me? Poirot gestured toward the chair opposite him. In truth, Monsieur Granger, you wish to speak with me. Felix froze. Then, with a defeated exhale, he sank into the chair. Yes, he admitted. I could not sleep. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Guilt can be a restless companion. Granger's eyes widened. I didn't kill him, Poirot. I swear it. Then calm yourself. Sit. Breathe. Poirot folded his hands. There is something you have kept hidden from me. Something important. A long silence followed. Felix's throat worked as though he were swallowing stones. It's about Lord Hemsworth, he finally whispered. About the document he'd asked me to fetch. The key to the safe. I lied this morning. I did find it, but I told you I could not. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Continue. Granger leaned forward. Elbows on knees, fingers twisting together nervously. 3 nights ago, Lord Hemsworth summoned me to his study. He asked me to retrieve a sealed file from his safe and make a copy, then deliver the duplicate to someone in London. He didn't say who. But when I opened the file, just long enough to ensure the pages were numbered, I saw the title. His voice cracked. It was labelled Marsh Account, Confidential Debts and Holdings. Poirot remained perfectly still. Julian Marsh. Yes. Granger raked a hand through his hair. I don't know the full nature of their dealings, but the pages mentioned forged signatures, falsified investments, schemes that could destroy Marsh's career entirely. And worse, Lord Hemsworth intended to expose him. Poirot's expression sharpened. And Marsh perhaps learned of this intention? Granger nodded miserably. I believe so, but there's more. Last night, before the fall, I overheard an argument. Poirot leaned in slightly. Between whom? Lord Hemsworth and Mr. Marsh, Granger whispered. Their voices carried through the corridor. Marsh was furious. He accused Alastair of betrayal. Said he would not go down alone. I was too frightened to stay long enough to hear the rest. Poirot allowed this to settle, then asked, Why did you not tell me earlier? Felix looked down at his trembling hands. Because I thought if you confronted Marsh, he'd know it was me who told you. And Marsh is not a man to forgive easily. He has friends, dangerous friends in the theatre business, men who threaten before they negotiate. Poirot let out a quiet hum. Fear clouds reason, yes, but your silence puts others in danger. I know, Granger whispered. I know. Poirot studied him carefully. There was sincerity in the secretary's fear, an earnestness in his confession. Yet something felt incomplete, like a sentence missing its final word. You said you overheard them arguing, Poirot said. Tell me, were there any other voices? Anyone else present? Felix hesitated, searching his memory. No, I don't think so. Poirot tilted his head. You do not think so? Granger's brow furrowed. There was perhaps another sound, not a voice exactly, more like a gasp, soft, but it could have been the wind. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Or someone listening. Felix flinched. Poirot stood, smoothing his jacket. Monsieur Granger, there is a matter you have not yet explained. When I examined the study earlier, I found the safe's interior dust smudged, as if someone had removed something in haste. Granger paled. I did not take anything, Poirot. The file was there when I left it. After the argument, I could not bear to check again. And yet, Poirot said gently, someone removed pages from the ledger. Someone removed a document entirely. And perhaps someone attempted to burn evidence. Granger clenched his fists. You think Marsh did it? Poirot's gaze sharpened. Marsh is one possibility, but not the only one. Felix blinked. I don't understand. Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft yet dangerous. Murder is not born from a single motive, but from the intersection of several. Opportunity, fear, emotion, and desperation. Marsh had the fear. You, Monsieur Granger, had the opportunity. Felix recoiled. "No, Poirot! You can't believe—" "I believe," Poirot interrupted, "that you are not telling me everything." Granger buried his face in his hands, silent sobs shaking his shoulders. The room seemed to constrict around the moment, the ticking of the mantel clock intensifying like a heartbeat. Last, Felix whispered, "I wasn't the only one who visited the study last night." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, now we arrive." Felix lifted his tear-streaked face. His voice trembled. "Lady Evelyn, I saw her leaving the study. Her expression, Poirot!" She looked horrified. Poirot's breath stilled for half a second. "And she wore her ruby ring," Felix added. "The one with the sharp edge. The one that taps when she holds the banister." Poirot's eyes flashed with sudden clarity. The footsteps, the rhythm, the tapping, a ring against wood. "Ah," Poirot whispered, "so the staircase speaks at last." Felix sagged, exhausted. "I don't know what it means, I just needed to tell someone." Poirot placed a hand gently on the secretary's shoulder. "Merci, Monsieur Granger. You have done the right thing." But as Poirot led Felix to the door, his mind raced. Lady Evelyn Hemsworth, descending the stairs after the fall, a ring tapping softly, and a look of horror on her face. The truth was coalescing, piece by piece. Soon the murderer would have nowhere left to hide. Chapter 8. The Widow's Hour. The manor felt different after dusk. Its long corridors narrower, its once grand staircases now looming with a vigil of shadows. Poirot, who held a deep appreciation for well-placed lighting and order, disapproved profoundly of such gloom. A house, he murmured to Hastings, should never be more mysterious than its residents. And tonight, the residents were very mysterious indeed. He had requested a private conversation with Madame Celeste Lockwood, the grieving widow whose sorrow seemed curiously selective. Present in her sighs, absent in her eyes. She had retired early after the discovery in the archive room. But Poirot was not a man easily deterred by closed doors or convenient ailments. At precisely 9 o'clock, he and Hastings arrived outside her chamber, where the faint scent of lavender trailed from beneath the threshold. Celeste admitted them with an air of theatrical fragility, her black silk mourning dress arranged artfully around her like the petals of a wilted flower. An oil lamp flickered beside her, throwing a soft sheen across her pale features. "Messieurs," she greeted, voice tremulous, "must this interrogation continue tonight? I'm unwell." Poirot's bow was courteous, but his eyes, sharp as glass, missed nothing. "Madame, grief is a heavy visitor, oui, but it is also the lantern that guides us toward truth." He settled opposite her, their fingertips pressed lightly together. "The death of your husband grows more entangled. Will you help untangle it?" She nodded slowly. "If I can." Their conversation began gently, Poirot asking about her marriage, her husband's temperament, their daily routines. But little by little, the patience in her voice frayed. Every mention of Lord Alistair seemed to tighten something behind her composed facade. "Your husband," Poirot said at last, "had many secrets, n'est-ce pas?" Her lips formed a thin line. "Secrets, every man has them." "But his," Poirot countered softly, "were costly." Something flickered in her expression, fear or anger, or perhaps both. She turned away, hands tightening in her lap. "I don't know what you mean." Poirot leaned forward, his voice a whisper of velvet and steel. "A blackmailer is dead, madame, and your husband has walked in the shadows of blackmail before, has he not?" Her breath caught. "Who told you that?" "It is not who tells Hercule Poirot," he replied lightly, "but what he observes." She trembled, but Hastings, ever susceptible to sympathy, felt a surge of pity. Yet Poirot's gaze remained fixed, unblinking. watching the facade crack piece by piece. "We had difficulties," she admitted at last. "Alistair was not an easy man. He kept things from me. He changed in recent months. Secretive, irritable, and yes, he received letters, threats, demands. I begged him to go to the police, but he refused." "Why?" Poirot asked. "Because the matter concerned his reputation, his political ambitions. He feared scandal more than danger." Poirot considered this, eyes narrowing. "And yet you told no one." "I was protecting my husband." "Or yourself?" Poirot asked gently. Her fingers froze. Poirot's voice softened, but the weight behind it deepened. A woman who fears for her security, who feels the tremors of ruin approaching, might make desperate choices. Tears welled in her eyes now. Real or practiced, Poirot could not yet tell. "I did not kill him," she whispered fiercely. "I loved him." "Love," Poirot murmured, "can be loud in speech but quiet in action." Before she could reply, there came a knock. Hastings rose to answer, opening the door to reveal Inspector Graves, breathless and alarmed. "What is it, mon ami?" Poirot asked. Graves stepped inside, sweat shining on his brow. "Sir, we've found something. In the east wing, another room, locked, sealed. You'll want to see it." Poirot stood instantly, a spark igniting in his gaze. "Madame, forgive us. This conversation is paused, but not ended." Celeste watched them go, her face ghost-white. The east wing of Lockwood Manor had a reputation, unused, reportedly haunted, and notoriously avoided by the staff. The corridor leading there creaked with every step, as if warning them back. Graves guided them to a door at the end, its brass handle dulled with dust. "No one has opened this in years," Graves said, "or so the staff claims." Poirot examined the keyhole, then the hinges. His finger swept across the floor, where dust should have lain thick and undisturbed. Instead, the faintest streak suggested recent movement. "Someone lies," Poirot murmured. "Often." Graves turned the heavy key and pushed open the door. A stale gust drifted out, cold, unmoving air. Hastings shivered. Inside, the room was small but meticulously arranged. A writing desk, a swivel chair, stacks of ledgers and envelopes, and at the centre, an iron safe. Open, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Graves," he said, "a lantern, if you please." They approached the safe. Its interior was empty, except for one item. A silver fountain pen, its cap engraved faintly with initials. "CL," Hastings gasped. "Good heavens, Madame Celeste Lockwood's!" Poirot lifted it delicately with his handkerchief. "More curious, Hastings, is that it lies within the safe of a room supposedly abandoned. It suggests our widow's involvement in matters far deeper than unhappiness." Graves frowned. Either she killed her husband, or she was helping him with something illicit. Poirot shook his head. "No, there is a third possibility, that someone wishes us to suspect her." He set the pen down, turning to the desk. A stack of half-burned papers filled the tray. Charred edges, ink smudged beyond recognition. "Someone tried to destroy evidence," Hastings murmured. Poirot nodded, but in haste, and haste, my friend, is the enemy of success. He picked up the top paper, deciphering faint remnants of handwriting. "Final payment due tonight, unless consequences." Poirot's eyes brightened. "A rendezvous, and not the first." Graves exhaled. "So the blackmailer met with someone here before?" "Or the victim met with his tormentor," Poirot said. "But tonight, something went wrong. The blackmail ended, violently." Hastings felt a chill. "Poirot, what now?" Poirot turned toward the window, its glass fogged, but bearing a smudged imprint of a hand. A gloveless hand. A hurried touch, a struggle. "Now," Poirot said softly, We speak with those who feared discovery the most, and we prepare for the storm that approaches." He lifted the silver pen again, contemplating its weight, "because this, Hastings, is the first true piece of the final puzzle." And as thunder rolled outside the manor, Poirot smiled, a smile that suggested he was already 3 steps ahead. Chapter 9. Revelations in the Library. The library was quiet, save for the faint rustle of the wind through the tall arched windows. Rows of books, many bound in worn leather, lined the walls from floor to ceiling, the scent of old paper and polished wood mingling into a musty perfume. Poirot moved deliberately among the shelves, cane tapping softly against the parquet floor, as though testing the house itself for secrets. Hastings followed, notebook in hand, ready to record every observation. The tension in the air was palpable. The household seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the next revelation. At the centre of the room stood Lady Evelyn Hemsworth, seated stiffly in a high-backed chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were wide and guarded, betraying only fragments of the composure she had displayed at breakfast. Beside her, Julian Marsh leaned casually against a bookcase, though Poirot detected a nervous tremor in his fingers, hidden from all but the most discerning gaze. And Granger, the secretary, stood a few paces behind, his posture rigid, his expression taut with guilt and anxiety. Poirot observed them silently for a moment before speaking. "Mesdames, Messieurs, I have learned much since morning, and more since our discovery in the East Wing. But knowledge is like a delicate balance. One misstep, and the truth tumbles into chaos." Marsh raised an eyebrow. "Do we have reason to be alarmed, Monsieur Poirot?" "Indeed, Monsieur Marsh," Poirot replied, voice measured, "because the person responsible for Lord Hemsworth's death is present in this room, and soon they will find it difficult to conceal their actions." Lady Evelyn stiffened. "You cannot mean—" Poirot's gaze shifted to her, unwavering. "I do not speak lightly, madame. Last night in the music room I discovered footsteps. Not the weight of Lord Hemsworth, not the careless movement of a guest, but calculated steps of a single individual. And I observed a ring, tapping against the wood, rhythmic, deliberate. Her hand instinctively rose to her left hand, bare of any ring." Poirot's eyes flickered to Marsh. "And yet, Monsieur Marsh, your alibi appears unsteady. I have learned of the argument between you and the late Lord Hemsworth. You feared exposure, and rightly so. But fear is a dangerous companion. It often leads to rash decisions." Marsh straightened abruptly. "I did not kill him. Yes, I argued. Yes, I was angry. But the man fell by accident." "Accident," Poirot repeated softly, stepping closer. "Accidents do not leave torn fabric behind, do not smear the piano keys with evidence of struggle, and do not leave letters unfinished." He turned to Granger. "Monsieur Granger, you have admitted much already. The ledger, the missing document, the overheard words. Yet there remains one final detail. You saw Lady Evelyn leaving the study after the fall." Lady Evelyn gasped, her composure slipping. I went to the study, yes, but I found him already. He was gone. I tried to help. I screamed. Poirot raised a hand, halting her. "Ah, madame, truth is rarely as simple as one wishes. Your presence is undeniable, but presence does not equal culpability. And yet—" His eyes bore into hers, unrelenting. Someone needed to hide the evidence. Someone needed to ensure that the ledger, the files, and the letter would not reach those who might act upon them. Granger shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't her," he whispered almost inaudibly. "Ah," Poirot said, his moustaches twitching, "and so the web tightens. You know the true culprit, yes? And yet you hesitate to speak. Why?" Granger's voice trembled. "Because revealing it could ruin everything, for everyone. The debts, the secrets, the schemes. It would destroy lives beyond Alistair's." Poirot nodded slowly. "Mais oui. But murder cannot remain concealed forever. Tell me, Monsieur Granger, were you in the library last night, before anyone discovered the body?" Granger shook his head. "No. I went to the study only after I realized something had happened." Poirot's gaze swept over the room, landing finally on Lady Evelyn. "And you, madame, when you left the study, did you see anyone?" "Yes," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "A shadow. I only saw the shape. I thought it was a thief." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, a shadow. And shadows, madame, often reveal the hand that moves them." The room fell silent as Hastings jotted notes furiously. Even Marsh, whose flamboyant air had barely concealed unease, seemed frozen. Poirot turned, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The torn fabric, the missing document, the unfinished letter, the steps in the music room, the tapping ring, the shadow in the library, all threads of one single truth. And the pattern is now unmistakable." Marsh stepped forward defensively. "You're accusing me of murder?" Poirot's reply was calm, almost gentle. "Not yet, but of deceit, manipulation and concealment, oui. That is why you argued with Lord Hemsworth, Monsieur Marsh, and why you planted clues to divert suspicion." Lady Evelyn's hands shook. "It was him. He tried to bribe Alistair with promises, and when Alistair refused, he threatened him. I saw it. I tried to intervene, but I was too late." Marsh's face blanched. "You dare—" Poirot raised a hand, his calm authority filling the room. "Enough! Witnesses, observations, forensic details. They all speak louder than threats or indignation. Monsieur Marsh, you have had your chance to explain, but the evidence is undeniable. You arranged the confrontation, intended to intimidate, and when the situation escalated, Lord Hemsworth fell. Accident? Perhaps partially. But your presence, your threat, your attempts to conceal the ledger, these are your crimes." Hastings blinked. "So it was him. It all fits now." Poirot nodded. "Oui, Hastings. And the final confirmation lies in the documents removed, the fabric found, and the shadows that spoke. Each piece of evidence led me here, to this moment." Granger exhaled. Relief mingled with exhaustion. I was afraid to tell anyone. I thought he'd get away with it." Poirot's gaze softened. "Fear can cloud judgment, yes. But courage, when the truth demands, is always rewarded." Lady Evelyn sank back into her chair, pale but resolute. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Finally, the weight lifts." Poirot allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "But let this be a lesson to all in Hemsworth Manor. Even the most cunning shadows must yield to the light of reason. The truth, mes amis, has a way of asserting itself." Hastings looked at the assembled group. "It's astonishing how everything connected. The piano, the library, the letters, the shadows, all of it." Poirot nodded. "Ah, mon ami, that is the art of detection. Observation, deduction, understanding the human heart. And then, patiently, waiting for the pieces to fall into place." The storm outside had begun again. Wind rattling the windows, rain pattering in steady rhythm. Yet, inside the library, despite the revelations and the tension, there was a sense of resolution. For the first time in days, the household breathed freely. And as the lightning illuminated the room in brief, silvery flashes, Poirot's sharp gaze rested on each of them, weighing their expressions, knowing that the final hour of judgment was near. Chapter 10. The Final Unmasking. The storm had passed, leaving Hemsworth Manor in a sombre dawn. The sky washed in pale grey, and the wet cobblestones glinting faintly beneath the rising sun. Inside, the house seemed to exhale, the tension of nights filled with secrets and fear finally loosening its grip. Hercule Poirot walked slowly through the grand hall, cane tapping against the floor in deliberate rhythm. Hastings followed, notebook in hand. But both men knew that words alone could not convey the magnitude of what awaited. Today, the truth would step out from the shadows and claim its due. Poirot summoned the household to the drawing-room, the same room in which Lady Evelyn, Julian Marsh, Felix Granger, and Beatrice Langford had faced him before. Each arrived, carrying the weight of sleepless nights, suspicion and fear. Lady Evelyn's eyes were wary, her composure regained but fragile. Marsh attempted a confident air, but the tautness in his shoulders betrayed him. Granger's shoulders slumped with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. Beatrice Langford, pale yet resolute, stood near the window, her hands clasped tightly before her. Poirot took his place at the head of the room. "Mes amis," he began, voice calm but commanding, "we have traversed a journey of shadows, secrets and fears. Each of you has played a part, whether knowingly or not, but the time for concealment has ended." He motioned toward Marsh. "Monsieur Julian Marsh, you were present in this house on the night of Lord Hemsworth's fall. You argued with him, yes. You feared exposure. You acted out of desperation, but it was not you alone who allowed events to escalate." Marsh's face hardened. "Are you accusing me of murder?" Poirot shook his head slowly. "No, monsieur. You were indeed culpable in spirit, for your threats inflamed a situation already delicate. But the act itself, the final fatal moment, was orchestrated by one who sought to protect another, and in doing so, concealed their own involvement." All eyes turned to Lady Evelyn. Her lips parted, but she did not speak. Poirot continued, unfazed. "Lady Evelyn Hemsworth, you discovered Lord Hemsworth's body after the fatal fall? You were startled, yes, and in your horror, you acted. You removed documents from the safe, attempted to destroy evidence that might have implicated you, and created a narrative to protect yourself. Yet every action left a trace. Every trace spoke to me." Evelyn gasped. "Poirot, Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, madame. I shall explain." He strode to the mantel, fingers brushing the silver clock, the torn piece of red silk found near the study, the misplaced ledger pages, the letter never sent, the footprints in the music room, all pieces of a puzzle. But the final confirmation lay in the sequence of events last night. The footsteps Mademoiselle Langford heard, the tapping ring, the shadow in the library, they revealed one thing. The person who returned to the scene after Lord Hemsworth's fall acted out of fear, not malice, and the silver fountain pen, discovered in the East Wing, carried the initials CL, Lady Evelyn's own. Evelyn's face drained of colour. "I did not kill him," she cried. "No, madame," Poirot said gently. "You did not strike the fatal blow. The fall was accidental, provoked in part by Monsieur Marsh's threats, but your attempts to cover the event, to remove documents and mislead observers, are undeniable." He turned to Granger. "And you, Monsieur Felix Granger, acted from loyalty. You hid your knowledge, but your conscience compelled you to reveal it eventually. You saw the sequence clearly, and in doing so, you became a witness rather than a perpetrator." Granger exhaled, relief flooding his face. I only wanted to protect her. I did not know what else to do." Poirot nodded. "Exactly, mon ami. And now the full picture is clear. Lord Hemsworth, engaged in delicate dealings with Marsh, refused to compromise the truth. Marsh, in anger, threatened him. Evelyn, discovering the aftermath of the fall, acted in a panic, seeking to protect herself and perhaps the family name. And in the chaos, the traces of each action, the silk, the ledger pages, the pen, the footprints, formed a narrative. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. But truth, as always, has a final, indisputable revelation. The unfinished letter found in the study, addressed to you, Madame, was written by Lord Hemsworth to warn you. He feared for your safety. And in this act of caution, he created the path that would ultimately illuminate the real events. Evelyn's voice shook. So, he tried to protect me, even in death. Oui, Madame. And in doing so, he left the clues necessary for justice to prevail. The documents removed were not meant to destroy lives, but to shield those he loved. The footsteps, the tapping, the shadow, all guided me to understand the truth of the night. Hastings stepped forward, still trying to absorb the revelation. Poirot, it's astonishing. The meticulous planning, the unintended consequences, and yet the ultimate accidental nature of the death, it all fits perfectly. Poirot smiled faintly. Hastings, the human heart is far more complex than a ledger or a letter. Each person's fear, loyalty, and desire intersected that night, creating a sequence that appears intentional but is in truth tragic and circumstantial. That is why detection requires patience, observation, and understanding, not mere accusation. Marsh, who had been silent, now swallowed hard. And I must face the consequences of my threats and deceit. Yes, Poirot said calmly, the law will decide the measure of accountability. But the fatal fall, the event that led to Lord Hemsworth's death, was not murder. It was an accident compounded by human error and fear. That is the nuance which must be understood. Evelyn sat back, her hands resting on her lap, tears glimmering in her eyes. Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You have lifted the burden from us all. Poirot inclined his head. Justice, Madame, is not always punishment. Sometimes it is clarity. Sometimes it is the truth revealed, allowing hearts to heal. Lord Hemsworth, in his final acts, left a trail that only the patient, the observant, and the compassionate can follow. And now we have done so. Hastings, still marvelling at Poirot's reasoning, added, It is remarkable, Poirot. The meticulous deductions, the human elements, the hidden motives, all leading to understanding rather than simple condemnation. Oui, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm. That is the essence of detection. To untangle the threads of fear, deceit and loyalty, to see the pattern, and to reveal it without causing unnecessary ruin. And now, Hemsworth Manor may finally find peace. The storm had cleared entirely, leaving sunlight streaming through the tall windows, illuminating the grand drawing room. Shadows receded, the air felt lighter, and for the first time in many days, the household could breathe without fear. Poirot stood near the mantel, surveying the faces of those who had endured so much. Mes amis, he said softly, the case is closed. The truth, though painful, is clear, and in clarity there is solace. Lady Evelyn nodded, tears of relief flowing freely. Marsh lowered his gaze in recognition of his role in the tragic events. Granger exhaled deeply, finally unburdened by silence. And Hastings, ever loyal, felt pride in Poirot's brilliance, yet also an awe of the delicate balance between human frailty and justice. Poirot allowed himself a faint smile, glancing out the window at the now calm morning. The manor, the household, and even the storm seemed to breathe in unison. The tangled web of fear, secrecy, and deceit had been unravelled. And in its place, truth, painful but undeniable, stood triumphant.